In the glittering heart of Manhattan's most exclusive gala, billionaire Richard Harlan stood like a statue, refusing every invitation to dance. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Was he grieving, hiding, or something far darker? But then the cleaner slipped in with her little daughter, and everything shattered. What secret from his past was about to unravel? Stay tuned, this isn't the fairy tale it seems. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Picture this. It's 2015, and the annual Harrington Charity Ball is in full swing at the iconic Plaza Hotel, where New York's elite gather under crystal chandeliers to mingle, make deals, and show off their philanthropy. Richard Harlan, the 58-year-old tech mogul behind Harlan Innovations, a company that revolutionized data security and amassed him a fortune north of $10 billion, arrives alone, as he has every year since his wife's tragic passing. Elena Harlan had been the light of his life, a beloved socialite known for her work with children's charities, until she vanished during a yacht trip off the Long Island coast 5 years earlier. The official report called it an accidental drowning, but doubts lingered in the press and among insiders. Harlan, with his sharp features, silver-streaked hair, and piercing blue eyes, cuts an imposing figure in his custom tuxedo. He nods politely at acquaintances, sips his scotch, but when women approach, heiresses, models, even old friends, he declines with a firm shake of his head. The room buzzes with speculation. Is he still mourning, or is there more to his isolation? Meanwhile, across the city in a modest apartment in Queens, Maria Lopez, a 48-year-old single mother, prepares for her shift. Born in Puerto Rico and immigrated to the U.S. as a teen, Maria has scrubbed floors and polished silver for the wealthy for over 2 decades, her hands calloused from years of labor. Her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, with her wide brown eyes and infectious giggle, is her world. That night, Maria's babysitter cancels last minute due to illness, leaving her no choice but to bring Sophie along, tucking her into a quiet corner of the staff room with a tablet and snacks. As the evening wears on, Sophie wanders out, drawn by the music and lights, her small dress a stark contrast to the opulent gowns around her. Harlan spots her first, a tiny figure weaving through the crowd, and something in her innocent curiosity softens his resolve. When she tugs at his sleeve and asks in her sweet voice why he won't dance like everyone else, he surprises himself by extending his hand. The room falls silent as the billionaire leads the child onto the floor for a gentle twirl. But as they move, Harlan notices it, a distinctive heart-shaped birthmark on Sophie's neck, identical to one Elena had. His face pales, memories flood back. How could this be? He pulls Maria aside, his voice low and urgent, demanding answers. Who is this child? Where did she come from? Maria's eyes fill with fear. She knows this moment could upend everything. Let's step back to understand how these lives intersected long before that fateful night. Richard Harlan's rise to power began in the gritty streets of Boston, where he grew up in a working-class family, his father a factory worker who instilled in him a relentless drive. By his 20s, Harlan had dropped out of MIT to start his first tech venture, bootstrapping it into a powerhouse through sheer grit and controversial tactics. Some whispered he cut corners, outmaneuvered rivals with underhanded deals. He met Elena at a fundraiser in the early 90s. She was from old money, graceful and kind, balancing his sharp edges. Their marriage seemed perfect. Lavish homes, private jets, a circle of influential friends. But cracks formed. Harlan's work consumed him, leading to late nights and trips abroad. During one such absence in 2007, while Elena was away at a spa retreat, Harlan had a brief, regretful encounter with Maria, then a new hire in their household staff. It was a moment of weakness, fueled by loneliness and stress from a major merger. Maria, recently widowed after her husband's fatal car accident, found solace in the attention, but when she discovered her pregnancy, she left quietly fearing scandal. She raised Sophie alone, never breathing a word, supporting them through multiple jobs while Sophie thrived in school, her bright mind a beacon of hope. Harlan, oblivious, poured his energy into his empire, expanding into cybersecurity contracts with the government, amassing enemies along the way. Elena's disappearance in 2010 hit like a thunderbolt. She had been on a solo yacht outing, unusual for her, and her body was never found, only her belongings washed ashore. Investigators ruled it accidental, citing rough seas, but Harlan privately hired private detectives, uncovering leads that pointed to foul play. Anonymous threats linked to his business rivals, perhaps a kidnapping gone wrong. He buried himself deeper in work, becoming a recluse at social events, his refusal to dance a symbol of his guarded heart. Now at the gala, with Sophie's birthmark staring back at him like a ghost, Harlan's world tilts. He escorts Maria and Sophie to a private lounge, his security detail hovering nearby. In hushed tones, Maria confesses, Sophie is his daughter. The affair was fleeting, but the proof is in the DNA. The birthmark, a family trait passed from Harlan's own mother. Shock turns to anger. Harlan accuses her of extortion, but Maria insists she wants nothing, only slipped up by bringing Sophie that night. As word leaks perhaps from a nosy waiter, the media erupts. Tabloids splash headlines. Billionaire's secret love child exposed at elite gala. Reporters swarm Harlan's offices, digging into his past. The NYPD reopens Elena's case, prompted by new tips suggesting her death was tied to suppressing family secrets. Detectives interview Maria, who reveals she once overheard a suspicious phone call in the Harlan home about silencing loose ends. Could Elena have known about the affair and threatened to expose it? Harlan's rivals, like competitor Victor Kane of Kane Tech, emerge as suspects. Kane had lost billions in a bidding war and vowed revenge. Interrogations reveal forged documents, altered yacht logs, and a payout to a shadowy figure. Harlan, facing board pressure, undergoes a paternity test. Positive. Sophie is his. This revelation humanizes him. In rare interviews, he speaks of regret, vowing to provide for her. But suspense mounts as evidence points to Maria's ex-brother-in-law, a disgruntled mechanic with ties to Kane, as the one who tampered with the yacht. In a tense courtroom drama 2 years later, the truth unfolds. Elena had confronted Harlan about the affair days before her trip but forgave him. The real culprit, Kane's hired hand, aiming to destabilize Harlan's company. Convictions follow, but not without cost. Harlan's reputation tarnished, his empire wobbling. Yet in quiet moments he bonds with Sophie, teaching her chess in his penthouse, finding redemption. Maria, now elevated from cleaner to confidant, shares custody. The story raises questions about power, secrets, and second chances. Was Harlan's isolation self-imposed punishment? How many hidden truths lurk in the lives of the elite? In the end, that dance wasn't just a whim. It was the key unlocking a decade of deception. What do you think was the real turning point? Share in the comments. Who was Richard Harlan really? A heartbroken widower still carrying the weight of Elena's unsolved disappearance? Or a man whose hands held darker secrets from years of building an empire at any cost? Why did a simple cleaner and her little daughter suddenly crack open the walls he had built so carefully around himself after all these years? And what buried truth about his fortune, his family, and that long-ago night on the yacht would finally come to light? These are the questions that haunted the headlines, the boardrooms, and the quiet corners of New York society. By the end of this story, you will question everything you thought you knew about trust, hidden regrets, and the price of keeping secrets in a world where money buys silence but never true peace. Now let's go back further, to the roots of Richard Harlan's life before the galas and the billions. Born in a modest neighborhood in Boston in the late 1950s, Richard grew up watching his father work long shifts at a steel mill, coming home exhausted but determined to give his son a better shot. That drive stuck with Richard. He was the first in his family to attend college, earning a scholarship to MIT, where he studied computer science during the early boom of personal computing. He dropped out in his junior year to launch his first startup, a small software firm focused on encryption tools for businesses. It was risky, but Richard had an instinct for spotting vulnerabilities others missed. By the mid-1990s, his company had pivoted to cybersecurity, landing major contracts with banks and government agencies. The money poured in, transforming him from a scrappy entrepreneur into one of America's most powerful tech figures. Forbes put him on their cover multiple times, calling him the guardian of digital fortunes. But success came with isolation. Friends from his old life drifted away, replaced by a circle of advisors, lawyers, and social climbers. Then came Elena. She entered his world at a charity auction in Manhattan in 1992, bidding fiercely on a painting to benefit orphaned children. Elena was elegant, sharp-witted, and from a family with deep roots in philanthropy. She balanced Richard's intensity with warmth, pulling him into causes he might otherwise have ignored. They married within a year, settling into a penthouse overlooking Central Park and a weekend home in the Hamptons. To the outside world, it was a perfect union. Photos of them at events showed a couple who had it all. Privately, though, the demands of Harlan Innovations pulled Richard away more and more. Late nights at the office turned into weeks abroad negotiating deals. Elena threw herself into her charity work, but the distance grew. In 2007, during one of those separations, Richard crossed a line he never intended to cross. Maria Lopez had started working as part of the household staff that year, fresh from years of cleaning jobs in Queens to support herself after losing her husband in a construction accident. She was quiet, reliable, and carried herself with a dignity that stood out. One evening, after a particularly grueling merger fell through and Elena was away at a retreat, Richard found himself alone in the study. Words were exchanged, comfort was sought, and for one night boundaries blurred. It ended as quickly as it began. Maria left the job soon after, never asking for anything, vanishing back into her own life. Richard buried the memory, convincing himself it was a momentary lapse. Maria, meanwhile, discovered she was pregnant. She chose to raise the child alone, moving to a small apartment and taking whatever shifts she could find. Sophie arrived in 2008, a bright-eyed girl who loved books and music from the start. Maria worked double hours to keep them afloat, never once reaching out to Harlan. She told Sophie her father had passed away before she was born, a gentle lie to protect them both from complications. Sophie grew up kind and curious, helping her mother when she could, dreaming of becoming a teacher one day. The birthmark on her neck, a small, distinct heart shape, was something Maria always noticed but never explained fully, calling it a family mark from heaven. Richard's life rolled on. Elena's disappearance in 2010 changed everything. She had taken the family yacht out alone for what she called a day of reflection off Long Island. A storm rolled in unexpectedly. The Coast Guard found the boat adrift, her life jacket missing, belongings scattered. No body was recovered. The investigation concluded accidental drowning, but whispers persisted. Some pointed to Harlan's rivals who had lost fortunes in deals he won, others to the stress of their marriage. Richard hired his own investigators, chasing leads that went nowhere. He withdrew further, attending events out of obligation but keeping everyone at arm's length. Dancing became impossible. It reminded him too much of Elena, who had loved to waltz at fundraisers. He refused every offer year after year, becoming known as the untouchable billionaire. That brings us back to the night at the Plaza in 2015. As the orchestra played and champagne flowed, Sophie slipped away from the staff area where Maria had hidden her. Drawn by the sparkling lights, she wandered onto the edge of the dance floor. Richard, standing apart as always, caught sight of her. Something about her fearless approach, tugging his sleeve, asking why he looked so sad, pierced through his defenses. He knelt slightly, took her small hand, and for the first time in years, stepped onto the floor. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the billionaire twirled a child in a simple dress. But then he saw it clearly under the lights, the heart-shaped birthmark on her neck, identical to the one his own mother had carried, the same one Elena had teased him about inheriting if they ever had children. His step faltered. The music continued, but his world stopped. He led Sophie gently off the floor, scanning the room until his eyes locked on Maria, who had rushed in looking for her daughter. In that instant, recognition hit both of them. What followed was chaos wrapped in whispers. Richard pulled them into a side room, his voice tight with questions. Maria's face drained of color as she realized there was no hiding anymore. Sophie, confused but unafraid, held her mother's hand. Richard demanded proof, timelines, explanations. Maria spoke quietly, the affair, the pregnancy, her decision to raise Sophie alone. The birthmark was the undeniable link. Richard's mind raced. Could this child be his? Why now after all this time? And deeper still, did Elena know? Had she carried that knowledge to her grave? The gala ended with security escorting them out discreetly, but the damage was done. A guest with a phone captured the dance. Clips spread online within hours. The next morning, the story exploded across tabloids and business wires. Billionaire's secret daughter revealed in gala shock. Reporters dug into Harlan's past, resurfacing old rumors about Elena's death. The NYPD, under pressure from public interest, quietly reopened the file on her disappearance. New witnesses came forward. A former deckhand who claimed to have seen suspicious activity on the yacht the day before Elena set sail. A business associate who recalled overhearing threats from a competitor. Maria was questioned extensively. She had no direct involvement, but her connection raised flags. Had she known more? Had resentment built over the years? Richard, reeling, submitted to a private paternity test. The results confirmed what the birthmark suggested. Sophie was his biological daughter. He met with Maria in his office, the city skyline behind them, and for the first time spoke openly about regret. He offered support, financial, educational, anything Sophie needed, but Maria asked only for privacy. She had built a life without him. She wouldn't let wealth rewrite it overnight. Yet Sophie, with her innocent questions, began bridging the gap. Visits started small: ice cream in the park, stories about his childhood in Boston. Richard found himself smiling more, the weight of isolation lifting slightly. But the reopened investigation brought fresh pain. Evidence emerged linking Elena's death to foul play, not from Richard, but from a rival executive at a competing firm who had lost a massive contract to Harlan Innovations. The man had hired operatives to sabotage the yacht, intending to send a message, but the plan went fatally wrong in the storm. Court proceedings dragged on for months, with testimonies, documents, and emotional confrontations. Richard testified about the strains in his marriage, the one-night mistake with Maria, and his lifelong search for answers about Elena. In the end, convictions were secured, justice served in a courtroom far from the glamour of galas. Through it all, Richard and Sophie grew closer. He taught her about computers, she taught him about joy in simple things. Maria watched cautiously, allowing the bond to form on her terms. The dance that night had not just revealed a daughter, it had forced Richard to confront the man he had become, the choices he had made, and the family he never knew he had. In a city built on ambition, sometimes the most powerful revelations come from the smallest hands reaching out. What would you have done if you were in Richard's place that night? Would you have danced, knowing it might change everything forever? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment. To understand the full weight of that moment when Richard Harlan took Sophie's small hand on the dance floor and saw the heart-shaped birthmark on her neck, we have to go back to where it all began, long before the Plaza Hotel ballroom and the whispers of New York's elite. Richard Harlan came into the world in 1957 in a working-class neighborhood of South Boston, the only son of a steelworker father and a school cafeteria worker mother. Money was always tight, but his parents pushed education hard. Richard was bright, restless, and determined to escape the cycle he saw around him. He earned a full ride to MIT, diving into computer science just as the personal computer era was dawning. By his early 20s, he had already walked away from campus to launch his first company, a modest encryption software outfit run out of a cramped apartment. He worked 18-hour days, slept on the couch, and learned quickly that in tech, the line between ruthless ambition and survival was thin. He crossed it more than once, undercutting competitors with aggressive pricing, quietly acquiring patents that others had developed, negotiating deals that left partners bruised. By the late 1980s, his firm had evolved into Harlan Innovations, specializing in data security for banks, hospitals, and eventually federal agencies. The contracts multiplied, the valuation soared, and by the time he turned 40, Richard Harlan was a billionaire several times over. Forbes listed him among America's most powerful self-made men, but the articles always noted the same thing. He rarely smiled in photographs. Behind the success was a man who carried quiet burdens. Richard gave generously but anonymously, millions funneled to Boston youth programs, scholarships for kids from neighborhoods like his own. He never spoke about it publicly. It was simply something he did. Friends from those early days described him as loyal but distant, the kind of person who remembered birthdays and sent thoughtful gifts but never let anyone too close. That changed when he met Elena Whittaker in 1992 at a benefit for pediatric cancer research. Elena was 32, poised, and deeply committed to causes that mattered. She came from Philadelphia money, but she used it to fund shelters, literacy programs, and orphanages across the country. They connected instantly. Her warmth softened his edges. His drive gave her ambitions a larger stage. They married the following spring in a small ceremony on Nantucket, then built a life that looked flawless from the outside. The Central Park penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the private plane for charity trips. Elena became the public face of their philanthropy, while Richard stayed in the background, funding it all. Yet the marriage was not without strain. Harlan Innovations demanded everything: endless travel, late-night strategy sessions, crises that could not wait. Elena understood at first, but over time the absences wore on her. She confided in close friends that she sometimes felt like a widow to his work. Richard knew he was falling short. He tried to make up for it with grand gestures, jewelry, surprise trips, but the distance remained. In the spring of 2007, during one of those long separations, Elena left for a wellness retreat in Vermont while Richard stayed in New York to close a critical government contract. That was the week Maria Lopez entered their household as temporary staff. Maria, then 40, had been cleaning homes and offices in Queens for years. She had come to the mainland United States from Puerto Rico as a teenager, married young, and lost her husband in a workplace accident in 2005 that left her with debts and no safety net. She worked hard, kept her head down, and carried herself with a quiet strength that people noticed. The Harlan residence was just another job to her: polish the silver, dust the art, leave no trace. One evening Richard came home exhausted, the merger hanging by a thread, Elena still away. He found Maria finishing up in the library. Conversation started politely about the weather, the city, and turned personal in a way neither expected. Grief recognized grief. For one night, two lonely people crossed a line. It was brief, unspoken afterward, and Maria left the position 2 weeks later without explanation. Richard told himself it was nothing, a lapse he could bury. Maria returned to her life in Queens, discovered the pregnancy soon after, and made the hardest choice of her life. She would raise the child alone. She never contacted him, never asked for help. When Sophie was born in early 2008, Maria held her close and promised her a better future. Sophie grew up in a small apartment filled with library books and second-hand toys, a bright, affectionate girl who asked endless questions and loved to dance to music on the radio. Maria worked every shift she could, saved every penny, and dreamed of the day Sophie could go to college without the weight of struggle. The heart-shaped birthmark on Sophie's neck was something Maria noticed from the beginning, a small, perfect outline that reminded her of a family story from her grandmother's side, though she never dug deeper. Richard, unaware of any of this, continued building. Elena returned from her retreat and life resumed its rhythm. They traveled together more, tried to reconnect. Elena wore a delicate silver necklace Richard had given her years earlier, a simple heart pendant she rarely took off. Photographs from that time show her smiling, but there is a subtle weariness in her eyes. Richard kept giving, quiet donations to immigrant support groups, scholarships for single mothers, perhaps as a form of unspoken atonement. He never suspected how close those causes were to the woman he had briefly known. Then came 2010. Elena took the yacht out alone one October afternoon, saying she needed time to think. A sudden squall hit the Long Island Sound. The boat was found drifting, her life jacket untouched in the cabin, personal items scattered on deck. Search teams combed the water for days. No body surfaced. The official finding was accidental drowning, weather-related tragedy. Richard was devastated. He withdrew completely from the social scene, attending only the events Elena had cared about, always alone. He refused dances, refused small talk, refused to let anyone see the depth of his grief. The necklace she had worn that day was never recovered, a detail that haunted him. Years passed. Harlan Innovations grew even larger, but Richard Harlan remained a shadow of the man he had been: guarded, solitary, untouchable. Until the night in 2015 when a little girl in a simple dress walked up to him at the plaza, asked why he looked so sad, and reached for his hand. The dance began innocently enough, a gentle turn under the chandeliers. Then he saw the birthmark. Time collapsed. The heart shape matched the one his mother had carried, the one he had once joked Elena might pass to their children if they ever had any. In that instant, the past rushed forward: Maria's face, the forgotten night, Elena's disappearance, all colliding in the middle of a crowded ballroom. That single glance set everything in motion. The questions that had simmered for years, about loyalty, regret, hidden lives, were about to surface in ways no one could control. What happened next would force Richard Harlan to confront not just a daughter he never knew, but the choices that had shaped his entire world. The night of October 15, 2015, at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan marked the turning point where Richard Harlan's carefully constructed world began to fracture in ways he could never have anticipated. Pulling back the curtain on the secrets tied to Elena's disappearance and the unexpected arrival of Maria Lopez and her daughter Sophie. Richard arrived at the Harrington Charity Ball around 8 o'clock, his limousine pulling up under the grand awning amid flashing cameras from the waiting press. He stepped out alone, as always, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo that accentuated his tall frame, and the lines of exhaustion etched into his face from 5 years of unanswered questions about Elena. The official report had labeled her vanishing as an accidental drowning during that ill-fated yacht trip off Long Island Sound, but Richard had never fully accepted it. Too many loose ends, like the missing life jacket and the unexplained storm warnings, ignored. He entered the ballroom with a nod to the hosts, positioning himself near the bar where he could observe without engaging, his blue eyes scanning the room warily. Invitations to dance came quickly. A prominent socialite in a red gown approached first, smiling warmly, but Richard declined with a polite murmur about not being in the mood. Another followed, then another, each rebuffed with increasing firmness, fueling the quiet chatter among guests. Was the billionaire still trapped in grief or guarding something more? Meanwhile, Maria Lopez clocked in for her shift at 6 that evening, her uniform pressed and her mind focused on the tasks ahead, wiping down tables in the prep areas, collecting discarded glasses from the edges of the event. She had worked events like this for years, blending into the background while the wealthy celebrated, but tonight was different. Her usual babysitter had fallen ill with the flu, leaving Maria no choice but to bring 8-year-old Sophie along. She settled Sophie in a quiet staff lounge with coloring books and juice, instructing her to stay put until the night ended. Sophie nodded obediently, her brown curls bouncing. But the sounds of the orchestra drifting through the walls soon proved too tempting. By 9:30, as the dancing reached its peak, Sophie slipped out unnoticed, her small feet carrying her into the grand ballroom where the air shimmered with laughter and the clink of crystal. She weaved through the crowd, wide-eyed at the gowns and lights, until she spotted Richard standing apart, his expression distant and somber. Without hesitation, she tugged at his sleeve, looking up with that bold innocence only a child possesses. "Mister, why won't you dance? Mommy says dancing makes sad people happy." Richard froze, his scotch glass halfway to his lips, caught off guard by the directness in her voice. For a moment the room seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the billionaire and the little girl in her everyday dress. Something stirred in him, perhaps a flicker of the warmth Elena had always brought out, or maybe just the exhaustion of refusal. To the astonishment of onlookers, he set down his glass, extended his hand, and led Sophie onto the polished floor. The orchestra played a soft waltz, and he twirled her gently, her giggles echoing lightly as her feet barely touched the ground. Guests paused, smiling at the unexpected tenderness, but Richard's mind was elsewhere. As he lifted her slightly for a spin, the collar of her dress shifted, revealing a small heart-shaped birthmark on the side of her neck, identical in shape and placement to the one Elena had carried, a trait Richard knew well from years of tracing it with his fingers during quiet mornings. His steps halted abruptly, color drained from his face as memories assaulted him. Elena's laughter on the yacht, her necklace glinting in the sun, the empty boat found drifting. How was this possible? Who was this child? Chaos erupted in slow motion. Richard released Sophie's hand, his gaze locking onto Maria, who had burst into the room moments earlier, searching frantically for her daughter. Their eyes met across the floor, and recognition flashed, old and buried from that forgotten night in 2007. Richard strode toward her, his voice low but edged with accusation, pulling her and Sophie into an adjacent alcove away from prying eyes. "You know something about Elena, don't you? How else could your daughter have that mark?" Maria's hands trembled as she clutched Sophie close, denying at first, but the questions poured out. Where had she been all these years? Why show up now? Security hovered nearby, sensing the tension, while whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire, guests exchanging glances, phones discreetly recording the scene. Richard's paranoia, built from years of suspecting foul play in Elena's death, surged. He demanded answers, convinced this was no coincidence. Flashbacks from that era paint a clearer picture of the events leading to what many now call the crime at the heart of it all. Elena's yacht outing in 2010 had seemed routine at the time. A day alone on the water to clear her head after a heated argument with Richard about his endless work. But investigations later uncovered discrepancies. The boat's maintenance logs showed tampering with the engine, subtle enough to mimic mechanical failure in rough seas. Richard's business rivals, particularly Victor Kane of Kane Technologies, had motive. Harlan Innovations had just secured a multi-billion-dollar defense contract that Kane had desperately wanted, leading to bitter public feuds and veiled threats. Anonymous emails surfaced post-disappearance, hinting at payback, but nothing concrete stuck. Was Elena's death a targeted hit disguised as an accident, meant to destabilize Richard? Or had internal family tensions played a role? Maria's brief connection to the household raised new suspicions. Had she witnessed something during her short employment? Perhaps overheard a phone call about silencing problems. Conflicting accounts emerged. Some staff recalled Maria as utterly professional, with no ties beyond her duties. Others speculated she might have harbored resentment after the affair, making her a potential accomplice in leaking information to rivals. As the confrontation in the alcove intensified, glass shattered somewhere in the main room, a dropped champagne flute perhaps adding to the growing unease. Whispers from guests filtered in. "Did you see the billionaire with that child? What's going on?" Richard leaned closer to Maria, his whisper sharp and urgent. "Who are you really? Tell me the truth about Sophie, about Elena, about everything." Maria's secret, held for 8 long years, began to spill out in fragments, admitting the affair, the pregnancy, her choice to vanish. But questions lingered. Had she known about the yacht sabotage? Was Sophie's birthmark more than genetics, a clue to deeper connections? The night that started with a simple dance now threatened to expose a web of betrayal, loss, and hidden motives, leaving everyone wondering if the accidental drowning was ever accidental at all. And as Maria's words hung in the air, the real unraveling was only beginning. The morning after that electrifying dance at the Plaza Hotel, where Richard Harlan had broken his long-standing refusal to join anyone on the floor, only to be confronted by the cleaner Maria Lopez and her daughter Sophie's startling birthmark, New York City awoke to a storm of headlines that would drag long-buried secrets into the harsh light of scrutiny. Tabloids like the New York Post screamed, "Billionaire's ballroom breakdown," "Secret child shocks elite gala." while more restrained outlets such as the Wall Street Journal ran pieces speculating on the impact to Harlan Innovations' stock price, noting a 2% dip amid whispers of instability at the top. Social media erupted. Wall Street forums on sites like Reddit's R-Finance buzzed with theories from traders and executives, many of whom saw echoes of their own high-stakes worlds in Richard's guarded demeanor, questioning if his isolation since Elena's disappearance masked corporate vulnerabilities or personal failings. Public reactions poured in. Some sympathized with the grieving widower finally cracking under pressure. Others painted him as a manipulative tycoon hiding skeletons. Maria and Sophie, thrust unwillingly into the spotlight, hunkered down in their queen's apartment as reporters camped outside, shouting questions about her connection to the Harlan family. Richard retreated to his penthouse, issuing a terse statement through his PR team denying any prior knowledge but confirming a paternity test was underway, all while the memory of Sophie's hand in his and that familiar, heart-shaped birthmark gnawed at him, teasing the possibility that Elena's fate was linked to this unexpected revelation. Detectives from the NYPD's Cold Case Unit, sensing the fresh momentum from the gala's chaos, formally reopened the investigation into Elena Harlan's 2010 disappearance, pulling dusty files from storage and assigning a team led by seasoned investigator Detective Mark Riley, a no-nonsense veteran with a track record in high-profile cases. The probe kicked off with a review of the original evidence, maps of the Long Island Sound harbor where the yacht was found adrift, scans of weathered logbooks showing no mechanical issues on paper, and autopsy notes on the absence of a body that had always raised red flags. Richard was the first interviewed anew in a tense session at his office overlooking Central Park, where he recounted the days leading to Elena's solo trip, their argument about his work habits, her need for space. But his answers carried the weight of new context, with detectives pressing on the affair with Maria, and whether Elena had discovered it, potentially sparking foul play. Richard maintained his innocence, insisting any threats came from business rivals like Victor Kane, whose company had suffered massive losses after losing out on key contracts. As the investigation deepened, red herrings emerged thick and fast, keeping the public, and Richard himself, on edge. One early lead pointed to Maria's late husband, whose lingering debts from his construction accident had left her struggling. Detectives chased bank records suggesting mysterious payments around 2010, wondering if Maria had been coerced into silence or involvement, perhaps as a witness to something in the Harlan household. But the trail went cold when alibis checked out, shifting focus to Richard's own shady deals, a series of aggressive mergers in the mid-2000s that had drawn SEC scrutiny, with whispers of insider trading that could have motivated enemies to target Elena as leverage. Stakeouts followed. Undercover officers tailed Victor Kane, observing late-night meetings in dimly lit Manhattan bars, and even wiretapped calls where vague references to settling old scores surfaced, heightening the suspense. Yet Kane was cleared after forensic accountants debunked the links. His alibi for the yacht incident ironclad, with time-stamped emails from overseas. Interwoven with these false leads were moments of raw tension, reenacted phone calls from anonymous tipsters, claiming to have seen Elena arguing with a shadowy figure on the dock, document scans, revealing altered weather reports that downplayed the storm's severity, and maps pinpointing potential sabotage points along the coastline. Detectives posed hard questions to Maria in a sterile interrogation room, her hands fidgeting as she denied any knowledge beyond the brief affair, but the birthmark on Sophie's neck kept circling back. Was it mere coincidence, a genetic quirk tying back to Richard's family line, or evidence of a deeper connection that Elena might have uncovered before her final voyage? Richard, monitoring from afar through his lawyers, felt the noose tightening, the secret from his past that had unraveled on the dance floor now fueling a media frenzy that dissected every aspect of his life. Wall Street forums lit up with speculation from anonymous posters, many older executives relating to the betrayal themes, debating if Richard's refusal to dance had been a shield against such vulnerabilities. The packing of the probe remained relentless, alternating between painstaking exposition, hours poring over Elena's personal journals, which hinted at marital strains without naming Maria, and high-stakes suspense, like a dramatic stakeout at a Queen's storage unit where Maria's old belongings yielded nothing but faded photos. Another red herring involved a disgruntled former Harlan employee who had sued for wrongful termination, claiming knowledge of corporate espionage tied to the yacht, but his story crumbled under cross-examination, revealed as a bid for settlement money. Through it all, the question lingered. Why had Maria and Sophie appeared that night, unlocking Richard's guarded world and reigniting doubts about his fortune's dark underbelly? Detectives circled back to Victor Kane's circle, uncovering a low-level operative with a history of maritime work, whose phone records showed calls to the Harlan estate around the time of Elena's trip. The net widened, public interest peaked with nightly news segments replaying Gala footage, and Richard Harlan found himself not just a suspect in the court of opinion, but a man forced to confront if that innocent dance had exposed more than a daughter. It had potentially revealed the key to Elena's true fate. As leads twisted and turned, one thing became clear. The shattering moment from the hook of that evening was far from resolved, with every new detail teasing the unraveling secret that could topple an empire. As the investigation into Elena Harlan's disappearance intensified following that unforgettable dance at the Plaza, where Richard Harlan had finally broken his refusal to join anyone on the floor, only to face the cleaner Maria Lopez and her daughter Sophie's revealing birthmark. A pivotal confrontation unfolded in the privacy of Richard's Manhattan penthouse 2 weeks after the gala, away from the prying eyes of the media and detectives. Richard, his face a mask of turmoil from years of isolation since Elena's vanishing, invited Maria over under the guise of discussing Sophie's future, but the air thickened with unspoken accusations as soon as she arrived without Sophie, who was left with a trusted neighbor. He paced the room, the city lights twinkling below like distant reminders of his empire, and demanded the full truth about the affair from 2007, the birthmark that echoed Elena's own, and any ties to the yacht incident that had shattered his life. Maria, her voice steady at first but cracking under the weight, finally confessed. Yes, Sophie was his daughter, conceived during that brief, regretful encounter when Elena was away and loneliness had overwhelmed them both. But the revelation went deeper. Elena had discovered the pregnancy through a misplaced letter Maria had drafted but never sent, confronting Richard in tears yet choosing forgiveness to preserve their marriage and his rising legacy in the tech world. Richard's world spun as Maria continued, her words painting a picture of quiet desperation. Elena had kept the secret close, even supporting Maria anonymously through small, untraceable donations to ease her burdens as a single mother, all while urging Richard to focus on his company amid growing threats from rivals like Victor Kane, who had uncovered the affair through corporate spies and used it as leverage in their bitter contract battles. The motive crystallized in chilling clarity. Kane's operatives had staged Elena's drowning not just for revenge over lost billions, but to silence her before she could expose the blackmail that threatened to topple Harlan Innovations, with its government ties and stock valuations hanging in the balance. Richard sank into a chair, the pieces fitting together. The tampered yacht engine, the ignored storm warnings, Elena's final call to him that day expressing vague worries about protecting what we've built. The emotional peak hit as Richard realized his empire's stakes had cost him everything. His midlife choices now laid bare in a way that echoed the regrets many successful men carry. Protecting legacies at the expense of personal truths, hidden family ties surfacing when least expected. Courtroom scenes months later brought the climax to a head, with reenacted testimonies unfolding in a packed New York federal courthouse, where Victor Kane and his associates faced charges of conspiracy and murder. Maria took the stand under immense pressure, her tear-streaked face broadcast on news feeds, confessing to her limited role. She had unknowingly provided a key detail about the household schedule to a seemingly innocuous acquaintance who turned out to be Kane's informant, but she swore no direct involvement in the plot, her only guilt being silence to shield Sophie. Family reactions pierced the air. Richard's stoic facade cracked as he watched from the gallery, his hand clenching at memories of Elena's forgiveness. Sophie's confusion tugged at every heartstring, the 8-year-old sitting wide-eyed beside a social worker, asking innocent questions like why everyone was so sad, her small presence a reminder of the innocent lives caught in the crossfire of ambition. The judge's gavel fell on convictions, but not without Richard's own testimony admitting his affair and the strains it placed, themes of redemption weaving through as he spoke of rebuilding for Sophie's sake. That shattering moment from the gala hook, when the cleaner slipped in with her daughter and unlocked Richard's guarded heart, now revealed as the catalyst exposing a murder born of corporate warfare, leaving him to grapple with hidden ties that older men in America might recognize, the pull of legacy, the cost of secrets, and the chance for late-life healing. As verdicts echoed, Richard reached out to Maria post-trial, not in anger but understanding, the unraveling secret finally paving a path toward an unforeseen family bond. Just when the courtroom verdict seemed to close the chapter on Elena Harlan's staged drowning, tying it neatly to Victor Kane's corporate vendetta, after Richard Harlan's dance with Sophie at the Plaza had shattered his isolated world and exposed the cleaner Maria Lopez's long-held secret, a final piece of evidence surfaced in the appeals process that delivered a gut-punch surprise no one saw coming, reshaping everything about the motives behind that tragic yacht incident. Detectives, combing through Maria's old family records at Richard's insistence to clear any lingering doubts about Sophie's paternity and the birthmark's implications, uncovered faded documents from the 1970s. Elena's wealthy Philadelphia family had invested in a real estate scheme that displaced hundreds of immigrant families in Puerto Rico, including Maria's parents, who lost their home and livelihood, forcing their desperate move to the United States where hardship followed them until their early deaths. Maria, as a young girl, had heard the stories repeatedly, nurturing a quiet resentment toward the Whittaker name, Elena's maiden surname, that festered over decades. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Maria had not been an innocent bystander or mere witness. She had orchestrated Elena's death through subtle manipulations, feeding information to Kane's operatives not for financial gain, but pure revenge, using her brief access to the Harlan household in 2007 to plant seeds of discord that culminated in the sabotage, all while keeping her distance to avoid suspicion. Richard, cleared of any direct involvement in the murder, but haunted by his own guilt over the affair and neglect that had strained his marriage to Elena, faced this truth in a private meeting with prosecutors. His hands shaking as he reviewed the evidence, old letters from Maria's mother detailing the ruin caused by the Whittakers, cross-referenced with Maria's anonymous tips to Kane's team about Elena's yacht schedule. The courts adjusted charges accordingly, convicting Maria on conspiracy counts in a separate trial where she broke down, admitting the vendetta, but insisting it was justice for her family's suffering, her eyes locking on Richard as she spoke of watching his empire grow while her life remained in shadows. Sophie, now caught in the whirlwind, was placed temporarily with protective services, her confusion palpable in reports of her asking why her mother was gone and if the nice man from the dance would visit. Richard, drawing on his Boston roots and the quiet charity he had always practiced, petitioned for custody quietly, arguing his biological tie and commitment to provide stability. The judge granted it after evaluations, allowing him to adopt Sophie formally in a low-key proceeding that marked his shift from solitary billionaire to reluctant father. In the quiet aftermath, Richard found a measure of peace in his penthouse, teaching Sophie about the stars from the rooftop terrace, much like he once did with Elena, while integrating her into his life with school enrollments and family therapy to heal the fractures. Maria, serving her sentence, wrote letters expressing remorse, acknowledging that her revenge had only perpetuated pain. This final layer peeled back the hook of that gala night even further. The cleaner slipping in with her daughter had not just unraveled a secret from Richard's past, but exposed a chain of grievances spanning generations, where wealth's shadows hid vendettas as deep as any boardroom rivalry. In the world of wealth and shadows, can justice ever heal the wounds of the past? Or do secrets always resurface, demanding their due no matter the cost? Richard's empire stabilized, but he carried the weight forever, a man transformed by one dance that destroyed and rebuilt everything. If you were Harlan, would you have danced, knowing it could destroy everything? That dance at the Plaza Hotel, where Richard Harlan finally allowed himself to step onto the floor after years of refusing every invitation, only to have the cleaner Maria Lopez slip in with her little daughter Sophie and reveal a birthmark that shattered a decade of secrets, changed more lives than anyone could have predicted. From the moment Sophie's small hand reached for his, unlocking the guarded world Richard had built since Elena's disappearance, the chain of events exposed betrayals, vendettas, and hidden family ties that no amount of wealth could bury forever. Maria's revenge, rooted in the ruin Elena's family had brought to her parents long ago, had twisted into a murder staged as a drowning, while Richard carried the guilt of neglect that had left cracks for rivals like Victor Kane to exploit. Yet in the quiet resolution, with Sophie now part of his life and Maria serving her sentence, Richard found a fragile peace, teaching his daughter about the city he had conquered, reflecting on the man he had become, and wondering if redemption could ever fully mend what ambition and old wounds had broken. What do you think was the real motive behind that fateful dance? Was it Richard's buried longing for connection finally surfacing, or the universe forcing the truth about Sophie, Elena, and Maria into the open? Share your theories in the comments below. We read every one and love hearing your perspectives. And if this twist left you reeling, the way one simple moment at a gala unraveled an empire's worth of secrets, subscribe now for more real-life stories of betrayal, hidden pasts, and hard-won redemption. Hit that like button if justice was served. Or was it? Next up, the CEO who vanished after one bad deal. Don't miss it. Turn on notifications so you never have to wait. Thank you for watching all the way through.